in a few years earlier, it was about people had interviewed like working class heroes. People had sought out to interview because 40 years in journalism, that's the other thing, is I've been in journalism now 40 years, and in that time I've interviewed a lot of people. Some of them I've sought out because they were like my hero. Shankly, when I was still at school, Jack Jones, he's staring at me now, Ali over there. He's staring at me.
Can't believe you've interviewed him.
Yeah, people like that. And so I just thought, it kicked in when I saw Mike Lee, the screenwriter Mike Lee, does lots of kind of really good reality stuff about working class situations. And he did the Peterloo Massacre, called Peterloo. It was about the Peterloo Massacre. And he said that, this was a pivotal point in British social history. The cavalry waded in. It was a peaceful kind of rally about voting reform. Waded in. The hussars killed about 18 people, got killed. And it was it's a massive social change in many respects. Sorry, a liberal outpouring, like the Manchester Guardian was set up, for example, and they realised that they'd gone a bit too far. They gave a few little kind of crumbs of comfort to the workers, but he realised that he lived 15 minutes from where that happened in Manchester, and he went to a really good school in Salford, and he'd never heard about it.
The Leggett podcast is sponsored by Montrex. Montrex is a cutting-edge sportswear brand empowering athletes across the world, built to enhance performance and give you confidence to go the extra mile. They've got some of the most incredible products at montrex.com. There is a link below this video. Click the link and at checkout enter the code LEGGIT for 15% off your order. That's LEGIT, all one word. Everything from jackets, cargo pants, gym tops, t-shirts, running jackets, running pants. Everything is on their website, and they sponsor some of the most incredible athletes. Everything from UFC fighter Leon Edwards and a good friend of the podcast, boxer Jazza Dickens. So click the link below, use the code LEGGIT at checkout for 15% off your order. Right. Leggett Podcast with myself, Tom Wickstead.
It's me, Andy Grant, and this week's guests, one of my favourites from last time, is Brian Reade.
Hi Andy, hi Tom.
Hello.
Okay.
Thank you very much, mate. Last time, I remember, just before we mentioned Montrex, I was thinking of our last conversation we had when I was driving here. And what did you, did you do wedding? What was the wedding thing? Was it a wedding or like impersonator?
Singing telegrams.
That was it.
Yeah.
What's the first thing you thought of when you saw Brian?
What a good shape.
Yeah.
Right, we must say as well, Montrex, I sponsor the podcast. Use the code LEGGIT for 15% off your order.
Keep supporting them, follow them on Instagram and all that jazz.
All links are in the description as well. So,
mate, genuinely meant that in the intro there. You genuinely are in my top 3 or 5 podcasts, mate. Really.
Nice. You went 3 now, better.
We have done a lot now, to be fair, but and weirdly enough, I was in
Going down the medals table.
Yeah, I was in the Shankly hotel. I forget the guy's name. He's going to kill me, but he does listen to them. And he randomly pulled me. He was like, "Andy, keep the podcast going, mate. You know my favourite, Brian Reade. You still haven't beat that yet, so that's great. It's still out there." And like,
how long ago was that? Was that 2 years?
It was a while ago, wasn't it?
Yeah, it would have been
18 months, maybe.
Yeah, probably like August 2019, I think. Because I think the new season had started, and we went on you'd done like a...
It was correct, because you had me going, didn't you? I didn't know this. It was a surprise. 8 surprises. So these are all your predictions.
Yeah.
I say everything we're going to do great.
You did, yeah.
I think you backed us to win the league, to be fair, didn't you?
Oh, that's right, yeah.
Which obviously, you got that right, yeah. And Man City was second, I think you said.
I know it's coming up now at the end of the programme.
Yeah. Well, so anyone who hasn't, before we get into this, anyone who hasn't listened to Brian's first podcast at the Belter, so that was a bit more about his kind of his life, really, his career. This podcast is more about your new book.
Yeah.
Which comes out on the 5th.
On Thursday, yeah.
Thursday
the 5th, yeah.
Tell me about it, mate. How did it come about? Diamonds in the Mud.
Diamonds in the Mud, yeah. Well, it was the start of lockdown last year. It's a lockdown book, basically, as in... I spent a lot of time writing in lockdown. You know, when lockdown starts, you think, I should do something different, maybe grow beards when you've done that. Like, you're not having a go.
Yeah.
But get into jazz, understand wine. And they all went by the board in about a week. And I thought it was about time I did another book. And something had been going through my head for a while. You know, sometimes these things grow, you kind of think of something. And one of them was, in a few years earlier, it was about, I thought people had interviewed like working class heroes. People had sought out to interview because 40 years in journalism, that's the other thing, I've been in journalism now 40 years, and in that time I've interviewed a lot of people. some of them I'd sought out because they were like my hero, Shankly, when I was still at school, you know. Jack Jones, he's staring at me now, Ali over there. He's staring at me.
Can't believe you've interviewed him.
Yeah,
People like that. And so I just thought, it kicked in when I saw Mike Leigh, the screenwriter Mike Leigh, does lots of kind of really good reality stuff about working class situations. And he did the Peterloo Massacre, called Peterloo. It was about the Peterloo Massacre. And he said that, I mean, this was a pivotal point in British social history. The cavalry waded in. It was a peaceful kind of rally about voting reform. Waded in. The hussars killed about 18 people, got killed. And it was led to massive social change in many respects. Sorry, a liberal outpouring, like the Manchester Guardian was set up, for example, and they realised that they'd gone a bit too far. They gave a few little kind of crumbs of comfort to the workers, but he realised that he lived 15 minutes from where that happened in Manchester. And he went to a really good school in Salford, and he'd never heard about it. He'd never been taught about it. He'd heard about it, never been taught about it in school. And it got me thinking how our history tends to be taught through a very narrow prism in this country, I think, of monarchs. You know, I mean, you can all name any of the 8 wives, but you can't name too much about, you know, what else was happening that time.
It's true, that, isn't it?
Eton educated prime ministers, you know, Churchill, to Johnson, a lot of generals, a lot of kind of public school explorers. Now, that's not to take anything away from their role in history, but it's always seemed like the ones below are incidental. And I kind of thought, it got me thinking that one of the big problems in this country is the class system, no doubt about it. I mean, you can go through like who's at the top of most professions, including journalism, and it's dominated by Oxbridge and public school kids. And I just thought, what's the difference between a lot of public school kids and working class state school kids? And it's a confidence, not necessarily intelligence, but a confidence that they're almost. If you go to a good private school then to Oxbridge, you think it's your divine right in life to then go and have a great job in the civil service or in politics or whatever. You go to a state school in Liverpool or Halifax or whatever, and you think, you know, I'm not saying kids don't come through and do great, but most think, well, it's our position, you know, and they lack that kind of confidence. And I thought one of the reasons might have been that they're not really taught about people from their class or their background who really do well, who succeed. They're not really taught about it. I remember Diana Spencer's brother, Charles Spencer, you know, the one who gave the speech at the funeral. Came in, he read this article, he said, isn't it amazing, my kids are coming home from school and they've told me that they're now teaching about my sister in school. And I thought, hang on a minute, what did she do? I mean, I know she was world famous, etc., but she wasn't that bright. She basically was a good Protestant virgin to allow the kind of the monarchy to go on. And then she did a few things with landmines and stuff like that. But basically, what she contributed to say to some of the subjects in my book, which is the Hillsborough mothers, the way they fought to overturn, you know, the likes of Doreen Lawrence, you know, and others, you think, it's just ridiculous how she's this. She's, and so that set me off that kind of thinking, well, why didn't I write a book about working class heroes? My working class heroes, the ones I've met. And attach it at the start with a kind of essay, that kind of intro about what I've just been saying there. And funny enough, it starts, I was thinking of you as I was coming in, because it starts with a story about me meeting speaking to a prisoner of war, a fella was in Coventry. I was working the night shift at a kitchen, and he was a security man. He came in one night, he was gutted. He said, what's up? He said, I've just been watching that, the cenotaph today. I've seen them royals with all those frigging medals on. Half of them have never seen any action. He says, and I was a Japanese prisoner of war. I said, honest to God, lad, when we came back, emaciated and broken, treated like dirt. And he said to me, heroes come cheap in this country, son, always remember that. And then a few years later, 2001, the BBC did a poll of the greatest Britons ever. You might vaguely remember it. This big thing, who are the greatest Britons? Because it was the end of the century, you know. And I look back at it again. Found that there was 10 kings and queens in it, which is a bit weird. At number 76 came the unknown soldier. Now, you think the unknown soldier is the greatest hero of this country, because what it symbolises is all those men and women who died in the field, laid their lives down.
Thousands of them.
Laid their lives down. And you know, there's the tomb of the unknown soldier in Westminster Abbey. You think, oh, well, how can anyone get close to that? Yeah. Number 76, one Edda Robbie Williams.
Robbie Williams.
So it's kind of it's that kind of thing about, you know, turning the concept on its head about what heroism is. And so I've done different chapters and I've broke them up into kind of labels. So Dennis Skinner's the first one, the class warrior, one of the funniest fellas, most principled fellas I've ever met.
He just always walks out of Parliament, doesn't he? He always kicks out, doesn't he? Yeah. I don't know too much about him. All I know is he gets kicked out of Parliament.
Well, total.
So are these all based on people you've met?
Totally, I've met. So when people turn around and say, "Oh, you didn't put him in, lads," well, I didn't meet him, or he didn't make it. Bill Shankly and Bob Paisley are one chapter, because again, what they did for Liverpool. I mean, how does a team stay? How does a team stay one of the biggest in the world over 30 years when they don't win their own domestic title? Or get close to it a few times, but one of the reasons is what they built, what these two fellas built, the community, the roots, the character they gave it, the soul. So that chapter starts off the night Liverpool won the league last year, and saying inside the stadium there's this club now worth 2.2 billion and globally loved or respected or whatever. But how have they stayed there after 30 years? Because most clubs they'd fall way out the top 10 in the world, wouldn't they? Top 20 even. And those two statues outside those two fellas, basically,
It is mad.
And nothing out the game, and admittedly, and when I met them both, and they were just, pleasure to be honest. They're the joy bringers. Ali's in there. I keep looking at me. He's having a go at me.
He's
the liberator, because what he did. Because one thing about Ali was, I thought, this is mainly about, but apart from him, it's about British kind of heroes, because the premise is again about we should need to teach in this country. But if you met Muhammad Ali, you've got to put him in the book, haven't you? And so, but about Ali, it occurred to me at the time when I went to interview him in 2001, a couple of black mates were saying, "Oh my God, I idolised that fella." The reason was, and I go, "So did I." It was a different reason for us. You loved him, you loved his charisma, you loved the fact that he could beat him, you loved it. So to get that, but where we grew up in a massively, overwhelmingly white in the 60s, Liverpool. We suffered racial abuse most days, and we didn't think we had a lot of worth in many respects, And then Ali was coming in. He was the prettiest. He was the greatest. He was the best boxer. He was classy. He was taking political stands, and all their mates loved him and adored him. But they couldn't be Ali. But we could be Ali because we were black. And it struck me that that's the kind of what. And I went to his funeral in Kentucky about 5 years ago, and I spoke to a few people in the road where he lived, fellas his age. And again, it was the same thing. I went, well, I just feel like to have all like the world's press. I don't care about them. We care about what he did for us. Because when we were growing up, schools were segregated, restaurants were segregated. And he gave a great quote. He said, Ali freed us from the prison of our own inferiority. He made us feel, not just black kids in Louisville, black kids across America. And as I found out, across the world.
Yeah, across Europe.
Felt what he gave them was something. So
how did you manage to we might have touched on this on the first, how did you manage to interview him?
It's a long time ago now. I think he was working on a film, and I knew one of the producers on the film, and he wanted money for his organisation. He loved the British. He always loved them. He thought I was from London initially, but he loved the English kind of thing. So he's quite happy. And I think we offered to give a few bob to his foundation. And he wants to do something with the British, so that was it.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm a massive fan of Ali. He's one of those people where, if you could think of 5 people in the whole of time, he's always on there for me. I've just been a massive fan of him. And just on what you said there, I've watched a number of interviews of black people at that time, and they say, black people are always thought of being ugly. And I always thought that was really sad. Like, like ugly. There's just a race of like ugly people. That's how they were thought. And then suddenly, this cocky kid, he's like, "Look, I'm so pretty, pretty."
And you couldn't argue with it.
And it's like, and he's hard as fuck as well. He's champion of the world.
And he's witty. And he does poetry. And he looks like an Adonis, doesn't he? He used to make all the others look like punch-drunk punks, didn't he? They all looked ugly, fat lumps. Yeah. Compared to him, he could dance. And when I got a mate of mine, Morris Besman, he's a blackface, back right in Liverpool. And I said, "Would you like to talk about this?" He went, "Yeah, definitely." Because I wouldn't put words into people's mouth. And he went, "No, God." So I grew up in Kirby. He said, "We were the only black family apart from the Contis." He says, "Could you imagine the stick we got in Kirby?" He says, "On a daily basis, And he said, "But at the time, I just thought it was just us. It was just, this is what happens in Kirby. I didn't even think it was really outside. Because blacks weren't even represented on the television. They weren't even playing football. And you remember Clive Bestnack got the stick. There you go." And then he said that Enoch Powell came along with his Rivers of Blood speech. And I saw all these people marching in favour, but I thought, oh my God, it's not just Kirby, it's right across Britain. He says, and then Ali came along, And with this Viet Cong, I ain't gonna fight no Viet Cong ever call me an M-word. And I realised it was across the world. He said, he made me realise, this is just suffering. I'm suffering, or you're suffering, Kirby. Do you suffer it across the world? He said, that kind of opened my eyes to it, so.
It's weird, isn't it, that you think of something like Ali, and before we mentioned Paisley and Shankly, that the things that they were doing now so important to our culture today.
Yeah.
Like the lasting legacy they've had, it's still spoken about, obviously it's still written about, and our views, and for example, for us anyway, for football, you think it is because of them. And the Black Lives Matter stuff, which you went on, again, it's for all that. It's mad, isn't it, how just certain people in time have just such an impact.
Yeah. And I think what I was trying to do was say, for example, the Hillsborough mothers, their story is phenomenal. What they did and how they kept going and kept going and kept going. Even if in the end, nobody really got convicted, what they did to overturn those verdicts. So I had to concentrate on two. You can't just write about, 90 odd or 100 or 50 women. And I did specifically do the mothers because it felt a very matriarchal thing, although there was a lot of fathers and brothers, etc., but I just focused on them, on Margaret Aspinall and Williams, because I kind of been with them from the start, and I kind of knew what they were coming, and they were the two who were nationally known, the two figures. And it starts with, I'm in the House of Commons with Margaret in 2016, just after the inquest had been overturned from accidental death to unlawful killing. And she's addressing MPs, party leaders, lords, celebrities. And in a good Liverpool expression, she gave them all down the fucking banks. And it was so good to see. And they were embarrassed. Yeah. In the very room where the Hillsborough conspiracy was perpetrated, there she was, this little mother of five from a heightened council estate, slaughtering them. They were embarrassed. They were like that with their heads down. They could stand with their heads down. I thought, go ahead, girl. That's
it's boss that.
Yeah. Hey, I wonder. I don't know what your thoughts are on this. Why there are so many Oxford, like Boris Johnson, and all the go to these. Eton's an incredibly expensive school, and how they all seem to just work their way into politics. Versus, I don't know what the percentages of, private school in politics versus state school, what that looks like. But it's strange, isn't it? Why there's pushed more towards politics.
I think it's when you go there, it's almost like in this country the Willy Wonka ticket, innit? You went to Oxford, you went to Eton, you're going to get a good life. Anyway, not many from De La Salle made it, but me, Wayne Rooney, David Morrissey, Mick Lyons. No, it's. I mean, and the worst thing is, you would imagine in time, this gets eroded. When the classism gets. It was there. That's how it was. We've come a long way since Victorian times. We've come a long way since, but we haven't, because. So when I was born in 1957, there was then 3 Eton prime ministers on the run, and then all of a sudden we got state school people in. We got Harold Wilson in. We got for all their faults Margaret Thatcher. It was Jim Callaghan, John Major. They went. Well, she was Oxford, but they went public school. They were state school.
Yeah.
And you're thinking, yeah, well, maybe it has changed. Maybe those that old Etonian thing you got picked out, and then. 2 out of the last 3 prime ministers we've just had have been old Etonians, David Cameron and Boris Johnson. So in less than 50 years, it's just gone back to it. And in many ways, it's got worse. There's a piece of doing a book about how hard it is now for kids to get into acting at the highest level. Because a lot of the best actors now are RADA trained, and it's hard to get into RADA. You need to have a lot of money. You need to be in London. So that's why it's dominated by public school kids at the moment. Cumberbatches and the... Hardy and Damien Lewis, there's so many of them, and there's actors quoted in there like Julie Walters and even Jodie Comer and David Morrissey saying it was a lot easier. Well, she does, Comer's no, but people around the 60s and 70s went so much easier in the 70s. If you're a working class kid, say in Liverpool, you join the Everyman Youth Theatre. That's not there now because there's no.
I heard a Stephen Graham interview. He'd done the exact thing.
Stephen Graham's done that because what happened was with austerity since 2010. Councils have had to cut back. It's more important to do social care than it is to do the arts, isn't it? We'd all agree on that.
Yeah.
But the effect that has, and then of course, with this country being so London-centric, with everything being centred down there, headquartered. If a kid from Liverpool say wants to go to London to try and hope to make it, well, you're going to need £1,000 a month just to pay for your rent and your travel.
Easy, yeah.
Easy.
Yeah.
So therefore, that's. that's after tax. Well, you've got to be on 30 grand a year just to fart. You know what I mean? And so it's like, but if your parents are rich, or if you are from London, or you've got a resident, well, you'll have it. That's where this intern system. So, and it's in the professions. It's in journalism, the law, in politics, in all the major professions, which is London centred. It's so difficult for kids from the regions to get in there, as a start.
And Eton's just on the outskirts of London, isn't it? Or pretty close anyway. So there's that.
You know, in the class system and people's view, for any younger listeners who are listening to this podcast, they might not have experienced this. When I've been down to London, I've probably told this story a million times in the pod, and I'm sorry, but I genuinely have spoken to people, right? I've done a talk with these big fancy corporate firms, and they're like, oh yeah, mate, and they're like, they think Liverpool is a shithole. Like they've been here in like the 60s or 70s, and they're like, oh god, how long did that take you to get down from it? Like 2 hours. And it's that view of that's fucking hell. And I'm like, when was the last time you've been up there? And he's like, I haven't been since the 70s. I'm like, mate, it's good, it's nice, it's a decent city. But
just to give it a try.
There is still that view, isn't there?
Very much so, yeah. And I think, people, let's face it, unless you come to Liverpool for a football match, or say 10 years ago, right, there wasn't really a good reason to come to Liverpool, because there's no, there's no, say before tourism came along, before the convention centre was built, where loads of people had to go for conferences, it's at the end of the rail line. So there's a reason to go to Manchester and Birmingham. You pass through it, you might want to get off and have a look. But unless you were coming up, say, to a football match at the Grand National, there weren't many jobs up here, so there wasn't really not a reason, or to do a bad news story, to go and say there's been another disaster in Liverpool. It wasn't really a great reason to come here, but I think the tourism industry, and I think the conference centre has changed a lot of that, and people coming up and seeing how great it looks,
Yeah, man, I know we've talked about this a lot, but when you compare the two cities, like to Liverpool and Manchester, the difference is they're only 25 miles apart. And yet the money that's been spent on Manchester, and you drive in and you see the cranes, the huge, brand new apartments are going up. I think they're getting a new conference centre, aren't they, being built soon or something like that. And the difference is just like miles apart, isn't it? And they're only 25 miles apart.
Yeah,
which is...
it'll never look as good as Liverpool, though. Economically, it batters us, but all those ugly flats go up. It's not.
Mate, so when you mentioned as well before, not ashamed, when you talk about confidence and the differences between private schools and state schools and giving people that confidence, I'm not ashamed to say I went to a private school, and I said this on the last podcast, is one of the things that they did really well for us was constantly getting up and doing presentations in front of people, even like sound like mini sort of networking things because they understand outside of.
I'm just trying to imagine my school trying to make it.
Everyone's looking business.
And networking events in Bootle was going to have a fight with the school down the road.
But it's lovely, but it's so true.
Yeah.
That is the big thing I've noticed when I went to university, and the difference between public school kids and state school kids was this amazing self-confidence they had.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, I was just University of Los Scousers, and we didn't want for self-confidence. It was a different type of self-confidence.
Yeah.
So self-confidence, we felt in awe of authority. We were self-confident in the bar, self-confident on the football pitch, self-confident in most situations, but when it came to authority, we'd really been trained, or we were more or less taught, just go along with things. It's not really your position to go. But I think that's so true, and that's why so many of them shine at job interviews and shine at Oxbridge interviews,
Yeah, and another big thing is, when you go to it in a class, even if you go, I remember not so long ago I went for a speed awareness course, and the guy was saying put your hand and everyone was sort of a bit nervous, and I've been there at when people aren't used to putting the hand up or standing up, and you can see it, can't you? I remember in our class, everyone was always, do you know what I mean? So there's a big difference between confidence, and I think that should be pushed through, through doing presentations, and stupid that is, and those sort of things, to try and instill that confidence.
The first presentation I ever done, getting up, standing in front of people, was when I was in Iraq, and we had a bit of spare time, and our boss just said, right lads, in your downtime, I want you all to make a presentation just to build up your confidence for when you go on to leadership courses and you get promoted, etc. But so I was 18 before I'd ever stood up in front of anyone, and which is mad when you say you're doing it in bloody high school.
Yeah. Through from like, year 6 onwards, it does make a difference, really does.
But I've got to say in the book, it is about class, but it's not, every chapter isn't about bring down the class system in kind. It's like heroes who were working class. And I'll give you an example of, I think it's my favourite chapter in the book, and I didn't realise it until I'd written it. It's about someone you've probably never heard of called Donna Marie McGillian. Now, she was hit by a bomb in Omagh, which was the worst of all the atrocities, and it was towards the end. It was like 1997, was it 97?
Wasn't there like 200 people injured or something? Did anyone die? It was
yeah. There's about I think it was 29
right
died, and so this was a peaceful market town, and the reason to bring it up is because I've met McGuinness and I've met Ian Paisley, and both of them to their own communities are obviously massive heroes to the other communities, the anti-heroes, you know what I mean? And both charismatic men who did what they had to do, but, on both sides, dodgy, And they were never going to bring peace to Northern Ireland. The politicians weren't, and the paramilitaries turned politicians weren't going to do it. It took the common people who said, we've had enough of this. Someone like Donna Marie, she walked into this £500 bomb in Market Street. A week before her wedding, she was out buying stuff. She took the full blast, read the last rites. She had 80% burns, 1 in 5 chance of living, blah, blah, blah. She got through it without any self-pity, without any kind of malice. She got married 7 months later to her husband, who was also took the blast. And the flower girl was in niece. She got killed in it. Little breeder. And the whole of Omagh was out to watch it. And what it said, it almost made the gunmen think, we can't win this. Now, I'm not saying it was that particular incident because the political machinations were well in the line, but the whole of Northern Ireland went, that's it. Because that was a terrible one. It was like no warning. It was like the real IRA. The IRA supposedly surrendered by then. It was the real IRA who kind of did it. And they just did it badly wrong. They left a bomb in a car in the middle of the high street, botched the warning, and it was the final curtain for it because we can't be going on like this. And I met her a year later, and she's still in a bad way, blah, blah. But she's going, I'm determined. I'm not going to let them win. I'm not going to let them win. And it's just her story, alongside of McGuinness and Paisley's. And at the end, it was her. It was people like that. It had the courage to go, you're not going to beat us. The terrorists are not going to win. We're going to stand up. This what the game was up. So that's the kind of heroism that I think is certainly more heroic than say, Lady Di.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's so, but she's just a working class woman from Northern Ireland. So
and the whole point of the book, mate, I'd never even heard of that story. Which,
no,
do you know what I mean?
It's one of those things that get lost in time. And it's, but I know Jimmy McGovern there. He thought, God, that chapter was brilliant because he'd seen the way it was set up about, McGuinness and Paisley. Because it ended up being the Chuckle Brothers, as they called them. They were worst of enemies, best of friends, and they were lords, blah, blah, blah. But it was about ordinary people. And I think a lot of that's what I'm talking about history. History, really, a lot of the major players are just ordinary working class people who don't kind of get the full hit from it because we think about above. Probably say Tony Blair deserved that because he came in at the end and said, I feel the hand of history on my shoulder. You know what I mean? But the work had been done. It was the resilience of working class people that Dow said, enough's enough.
Are you interviewing all these people from working at the Mirror?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how all these interviews have come about. You go literally...
Apart from Bill Shankly, that was when I was at school.
Oh yeah, of course, yeah.
And I did Jack Jones, who was tremendous story. I've spoken about before. He was the trade union leader from Liverpool, from Garston, who also fought in the Spanish Civil War. And that story, fighting the Spanish Civil War. Well, you were well trained when you went into action.
Yeah.
And I went along to the hill where he got shot on in Catalonia because we made a film about him. And you're thinking, God Almighty. Imagine being 25 years from Garston, barely know how to hold a gun, with a ragbag army around you of volunteers in the same boat. You've got the top of the hill in these cement like pillar boxes, they call them. You've got Franco's army. Overhead, you've got Hitler and Mussolini's air force, and you're trying to get up there with a gun, and you're getting all sorts of shit around you. And as I said, imagine the piss and the shit in your kecks, and there's lads around you screaming for their mum, because you went there for a principle. You didn't think the fascists should take over in Spain, and so many particularly from Liverpool, working class fellas went along and did that. And his story's brilliant. And then he became a trade union leader. He was voted the most powerful man in Britain,
Right.
more important than the Prime Minister, because he said he had them in his pocket, you know. And then fought for pensioners till his dying day, you know. It's a tremendous man. In fact, that's where the title of the book comes from. He's from Garston, and in Garston they call them mudmen, because he used to nick coal off the mud. And I was at, there was a mural erected to him in 2013, his 100th, would have been 100th anniversary of his birth. And he put this mural up in Garston, and this little lad fella side looked at me and he said, "Do you like Jack Jones?" I said, "Yeah, I love him. I've met him a couple of times, brilliant lad. He's Garston's finest. He's a diamond in the mud." And I thought, what a great title for work. You know.
Diamond in the mud.
And it wasn't until I got the book published, Phil said, "Oh, that's a song by Jerry Cinnamon." I thought,
When we got the first time, it was Phil who said, you know, he'll talk to you all day about him. Like, I feel guilty. One of those people I'd never knew about until you spoke a little bit about him last time.
yeah, I mean, it's...
I'm excited to read the book just for that, to be honest.
Story,
just
it's
for
a
that
story,
chapter.
because then, you know, it came from the abject poverty. As abject as you can have it, you know, sleeping on bare floorboards with gold over you, begging sarnies off the dockers as they came out. I mean, that kind of stuff, and he rose to be so kind of influential, you know, but, so yeah.
Does it bother you, Brian, that the fact, I'm just going to bring back to this podcast, because you mentioned about war. We had a 97-year-old D-Day veteran on here the other day. Unbelievable guy, only from Manchester. He's the oldest. He's worked for 67 years at Crew Alexander, Gresty Road. He's the oldest steward, was he?
Yeah, well, like, he worked on the turns. Did he sell
turnstiles?
he sold...
For 67 years he worked on the turnstiles, and now he sells programmes. He only stopped because of COVID, so no doubt he'll be back. He went, "Andy, I stopped driving at 90, and then I stopped riding my bike at 96, so some fella takes me now, my mate." Like, he was on the D-Day landings, you know, unbelievable fella.
Yeah.
Anyway, we've done a podcast with him. And as you know, we don't do this for the views and stuff like that. I do it because I want to meet interesting people. So anyway, we put it out there, got loads of great comments, but like however many views. And then you put bloody, you know, conspiracies about corona or drugs on there, and it's like fucking set, you know, that really pisses me off. Not because I want loads of views, but I think, you know, people like that, which is kind of like your book, you know, the heroes of the world in the society we live in now, they just seem to get
brushed under,
yeah. Like,
or just don't deserve the credit that they actually should get.
Well, I think the media, to an extent,
but I'm just talking about YouTube. I mean, I know like the big corporation algorithms and this, but I just mean as society. I mean, your book's obviously going against that, but I mean, how much does it upset you, and where do you think you can change it about society, where to get more on your page, where, you know, we're reading and learning about people like the guy we had on the podcast, or people in your books? Because from what I see from a podcast host, it's like people piss me off. They don't want to know about these people.
I think it's, well, one thing is you've got to tell people about them, haven't you? And secondly, let's be honest, popular culture, you know, the sex, music, scandal, gossip, glamour, money, wealth does sell, doesn't it? Otherwise, you can't lie about the Kardashians or whatever. You can't, you know, I mean, I'm working for a popular newspaper, so they will put stuff in that I write. They will put stuff in. But at the front of the paper, you've got to try and attract attention grabbing, you know. And it's an instant culture we live in now, isn't it, really? But, I mean, there are heroes in our midst all the time, and one of the chapters is I've called it The Nourishers, and it's about how the fan sport and food banks, you know, the two lads from the city, Ian Bay and Dave Kelly, how they started this tremendous thing, you know, two wheelie bins outside Liverpool and Everton. After, by the way, they'd seen a queue for a bingo hall. They thought it was going in for bingo, and they realised it was for a food bank. And they went in, said, "Can we have a look?" I said, "Yeah," because they were working for Unite at the time. And they said there was so little food to be given out to these people who were hungry that they were splitting pasta sacks and putting them into the sweet bags to give it out. I said, this was Liverpool in like whatever the 2010s, you know, 2050s. This looks like 1930s. And so they decided to do something about it. Set up these wheelie bins outside Everton, Liverpool. And a few years down the line, you've got Marcus Rashford in the house, getting the Tory government to overturn their own decisions on food poverty for kids. And it's a kind of a cycle that's gone right through from football fans, football players. It was all the working class people who came from that background and said, well, we can change things here. This isn't right. And in doing so, those I mean, if you look at Rashford, I went over to his mural the other day after he got, he got defaced. And the outpouring of love and the outpouring of devotion.
That was amazing, some of those scenes.
Yeah, and you're thinking, to me, the likes of what fan supporting food banks have done, because it's spread right across the country, and what Rashford and the players like Jordan Henderson and all those lads who've done stuff, they're overturning the stereotypes about fans and players. Because not that long ago, everyone thought a football fan like that shouted knobheads outside Wembley, off their head on coke, trying to bunk into a ground, and they realise there's another side to it, that fans are feeding the poorest people in the community, and footballers who not that long ago were just seen as bling obsessed, where I want a bigger car than you, give me more money, are actually really bothered, and I want to do something about it. And I think that's heroic, like Marcus Rashford and those lads, that's heroism in the popular culture, and it's amongst us,
You think about when we were talking about kind of the impact Muhammad Ali had on, those black people in maybe, the 50s, 60s, 70s who felt they were ugly and worthless. And then fast forward, 50 years, you've got a young black kid from Manchester overturning a Tory government who went to eating it.
What was there? What did Bojo and his merry band of men say? Why weren't they doing it? Because it seems so obvious to help feed. What was their rational? Because I know nothing. Obviously, all I hear about is Rashford overturning. But surely they
summer holidays, wasn't it?
Surely they have to have something where they can say, look, this is the reason why we didn't want to do it in the first place, or like
it cost too much money. They're saying
that was it. That was all.
Well, we've gone through 10 years of cuts, and they were never gonna. And of course, it was COVID, so like we're never gonna be dishing money if they didn't have to. They had to get embarrassed into doing it. So Rashford saw the situation. He was already working for a food charity. Saw the situation that was happening. So during these holidays, you've got to feed these kids.
So during the school holidays, the government we're saying that if
you never have, to be fair. It's not, you don't get free school meals during the holidays. But he was saying now, where COVID is, you should be doing this. You should be giving them free school meals. Oh no. Got voted down, and then he just embarrassed them with this letter. And all these backbench Tory MPs were going, maybe you should do something. Give in to him. You're losing it here. You're not going to beat Marcus Rashford. I'm not just saying that. 22-year-old black lad from a working class Manchester background. You're not going to beat him. And he realised that, and he caved in. Right. And there was a great flag on the bed sheets outside the Welcome to Wythenshawe. It said, Boris nil, Rashford won. So it just shows you.
So do you think after COVID? Do you think they'll change it? They won't change it back ever now, will they? As in, like, they won't think after COVID.
I think they probably will. I think we've got a lot more cuts to come down the line, but...
How do you think?
Yeah, I mean, who knows? It's
Marcus might embarrass them again, hopefully.
Well, that's it, because they were honestly going, how could you get embarrassed by that? But that's the thing about footballers now, they're empowering themselves, aren't they? Because they just don't take a shit.
Well, even the fans, mate, you think, and listen, I hate politics, and God, I know Liverpool's a very political city, but I fucking hate all of them. I think they're all fucking very similar. Anyway, the point I'm getting at is the fans supporting food banks, how that galvanised people was great. As you got like young lads going to the match. I mean, me and Phil and all the lads done it quite a few times where you going past, we were going for a pint beforehand, and I was going for a pint with 2 big bags of shopping.
Yeah, it's true.
And then on the way, the boozer we'd go. And I think heroes like that who can get, normal 20, 30-year-old lads to think, while we're going for a pint on the way, I'll bring a big bag of food. I mean... And
they use social media brilliantly as well, But, I mean, the essence of ingenuity is something very simple. What a simple thought. Everyone who goes to the match...
Try and bring a bag of shopping.
They're going to have a few bob on them, aren't they? And even if it's only for 4 pints. Just because myself, they're 5 pints. But they're going to have enough to go... They're going to have to go to buy a tin of soup.
Yeah.
From Aldi for 50 pence or whatever. If everyone brings one of them, you can feed half of Liverpool for a week. So it's a great way of thinking it, and then embarrass people into doing it,
And then with the use of social media, especially like you just mentioned with market, and then suddenly, like, because I remember seeing it on Twitter. I don't go on Twitter anymore, but like I remember seeing it it just went mental, didn't it? Everyone was involved. Celebrities from A to Z were, involved trying to push the government, and then clearly, obviously, they won.
Yeah.
Who's been some of the favourites then over the years where you've kind of thought they need to be in the book? Not so much the best one, but just the people who you thought, that's got to get in there somehow.
Well, 3 all-time heroes are Ali, Shankly, and Jack Jones, so they were always going to get in. There was someone like Barbara Castle, actually. You may not even heard of her. Barbara Castle.
No, I've never known.
Never heard of her. She was a Labour. She was the Labour heroine of all, best Labour female politician of all time. Well, that's open to debate. But before Thatcher came along, she was seen as the most powerful woman in politics. And Harold Wilson put into every one of his cabinets. And she was responsible for equal pay, for equal pensions. She did so much for women. A lot of laws on the road, the breathalyzer, the kind of speed limit, stuff like that. But she has been international development department. But she did so much for women, and she was just a really sound, fire in the belly kind of woman, you know. I met her a couple of times. I took her out for her 85th birthday. Took her out for lunch. And in Brighton.
How the hell does that come about?
No. And she said, she said, I said, where do you want to do the interview? It was down in Brighton. She said, well, you've got two options, darling. We can do it boring, sit round the hotel for half an hour, or you can take me for lunch. By the way, I love fish. I thought, yeah, it's got to be lunch, hasn't it? But no, she was just a massive fire in the belly woman who was, you know, born in 1910 and kind of fought the fight right the way through her life. I remember when a great quote, when she always had a good line back at men. Really had a good line back at men. You've ever seen that film about the women workers in Dagenham?
In the factories?
Yeah, that was, she ended up getting an equal pay, but she loses her seat in the Commons and she becomes an MEP. She's nearly 70. And she's on the same podium as Cyril Smith. Now, do you remember Cyril Smith?
I've heard of him.
Yeah, I've heard, yeah.
Huge fella, ended up, I've got to be careful what I say because the lawyers, but ended up getting accused of being a paedophile. Anyway, that's okay. She says to her on the podium, you're too old and you're has-been. She said, you're too fat and you never made it. And I thought, yeah, and I tell you, it was a strange one, a strange choice to me because Paul McCartney. So I interviewed McCartney a couple of times.
No, you've interviewed some fucking cool people.
And I thought there's such a case to be made for McCartney because, going back to class, I mean, what the Beatles did in the mid-60s, early 60s was phenomenal. Obviously, they changed the world for many, many working class people. I mean, if you came from Liverpool, if you were an artist from Liverpool before then, you had to change your accent to be accepted, whether you're an actor or a singer. Billy Fury from round here was told to sound trans-American, you know. Actors like John Gregson and Rex Harrison would sort of drop that. You're speaking RP English because to have, not just Liverpool, but to come from a regional city and sound like you came from that city made you sound dull and uneducated. So they were told, and the Beatles just went, fuck that.
Yeah.
We are what we are, and we don't change for anybody, blah, blah, blah. So the confidence they gave working class people, with, you know, from the north, say, with accents, or which working class people generally, you could change the world through your talent, was phenomenal. And McCartney was more of a working class hero than Lennon in a way, because John Lennon had a very middle class upbringing, because he lived with his auntie, Mimi, you know, and but McCartney was pure, you know, the speak scruff, you know. He lived in the council house in Speak and Allerton. I remember him saying when Lennon, not to me, but him saying, when Lennon was 21, he got £100 off his auntie, and they were like, what? £100? It's like getting a few grand today, you know, so they went around Europe on it. But I interviewed McCartney a couple of times in Barcelona, actually, and it was really good stuff. And I could easily done a really good chapter on basically why he, you know, Lennon got the song Working Class Hero, but McCartney was more kind of, and McCartney was more, out of all of them, in love with his home city. He was the one to come back here. He'd put money into Lippe. He'd make sure he went back and lectured there. He'd bring people round to the city. He wanted to show it off. Probably stayed the most loyal to Liverpool than anyone. So, but then I thought, can I get away? Does that sit well? A fellow's worth nearly $1 billion, and he's a Serb. He does the occasional thing with newspapers, which we don't love too much.
Well, so you had to really then, you had to sit down and really have a think.
Well, no, I just thought, I wanted to do McCartney because he's got his rightly, but it didn't sit well. So what I thought about, the way I did him, he's in the book, but the reason is this, it's because when I interviewed in Barcelona, I sat to a sound check on the first day, and he does My Love, you know, ooh, My Love. And it was one of my mum's favourite songs, and she died the year before. And I just got kind of filled up. It's one of those things to come here. So the interview, I mentioned that to him, and he was like, because a lot of time McCartney's been interviewed millions of times, you know what you're getting back, you're not sure you're getting it real, you know. And he kind of went, is it genuine? I said, honest to God, it's just hit me from nowhere. He said, well, I think about my mother every day. His mother died when he was 14, you know. I never stopped thinking about my mum. And he said, that's just so. He said, I'm going to dedicate that to your mum tonight. And when I do, you think about it. Because we got to love our mums. They're the best of us. And then I thought, at the time, when I was writing the book, I just had to go into the Royal because I had prostate cancer. All cleared up now, and I was in there while COVID was going on. And of course, his mum was a nurse. And the nurses were dying on the COVID frontline. So I thought, this chapter's got to be about the Mother Marys. It's got to be about the nurses. You know, you could bet McCartney into it, but I'm sure McCartney would be the first to say, my mother was more of a hero than me. So
I was getting chills then, mate, thinking
and I did it on 5 nurses who died in Liverpool, Merseyside Hospital, told their stories briefly about why and how. Again, this was, I forgot to say at the start of it, one of the reasons I wanted to do this book at the start of lockdown was, remember all on the doorsteps clapping every Thursday?
Yeah.
And the whole narrative was, well, these are the new heroes, the nurses, the low-paid workers. And I thought, okay, yeah, let's see how long that lasts. And a year down the line, they got begrudgingly given a pay rise, which is still below inflation. And all 90% of the honours in the New Year's honours should have been 100% to people who worked on the front line. 90% went to the usual crowd of cronies and celebrities. And I just thought, you know, the notion of heroism hasn't changed, has it? It was a blip. But what they did in that COVID was phenomenal.
Yeah.
So they had to be the last chapter, really.
So the nurses then, I've got the last chapter then.
Yeah, McCartney going into his so all that stuff about, so do you get McCartney in there, I just don't.
Yeah, no mate, I was like say when a bit when you start talking about your mums and stuff, and maybe without going too personal about your journey, I mean obviously I know you had a scare and stuff. I mean what did you see from your point of view and the nurses and stuff, because I thankfully haven't been in around the hospital, the COVID stuff, I've not been affected in any way. I mean, you're seeing in the news how much the nurses were going above and beyond and stuff. I mean,
well, it was do you
want a beer?
Yeah, go on.
Sorry mate, I've not Joe.
It was the whole NHS thing at the time, because it was last November, and they just, you know, the blood test came back and said, and they did a biopsy, and he said, oh yeah,
can I just pinch it off you as well?
You got prostate cancer, but it's not too bad, it hasn't spread.
It's the most common in men, isn't it?
Yeah, and if they get it early, it's fine. He said, so we can take it out, and I said, okay. Because the alternative was you do like loads of radiotherapy and they try and shrink it and you grow tits and everything. I didn't fancy it. You have to basically say you replicate the menopause. Well, I know I'm getting on, but I didn't fancy it. Now I've seen that firsthand, it's not funny. So I thought, no, I'll go for the operation if I can. He said, we'll do it in 3 weeks. I couldn't believe it. That's 3 weeks. I thought it'd be like NHS waiting list anyway, but also with COVID on, the Royal, you know. And he did it. And they did it on a machine, a robot. I've got to shout out to Kenny Dalglish of all people, because the money that him and Marina raised, so they were raising loads of money for Marina's breast cancer stuff, and then a few fellas were getting to Kenny going, well, prostate cancer is bad for men. I said, okay, and they raised £1 million for this thing called a Da Vinci robot, which goes in and removes it. You know, obviously there's a surgeon operating it, but it does it by that. But anyway, so I was in there for a few days, and it was weird to think you're in a hospital where people are dying in other parts of the world. These nurses are coming in every day and doing all this, and you know they're walking in not knowing if a nurse in another, their mate who's a nurse in another part in an ICU may die. You know, and I just thought it's just phenomenal dedication. Of course, the humour's there, the whole they see you through, and it's just so lucky. You know, these people are a bit special, I think.
Yeah, nurses. I mean, to bring back to when I got injured, I can't believe there was a nurse, two nurses when I was in intensive care, and they just done 12-hour shifts, and just the two of them would look after me morning and night. Yeah. And I remember being on all these kinds of drugs and stuff, and I'd be hallucinating, tripping out and stuff on bloody whatever they put me on. And as I was kind of coming out of it, I remember going, I'm so sorry that you've had to put up with me. And she'd be like, don't worry about it. And I'd be like, no, I feel so embarrassed. And I vaguely just remember, and she was like, Andy. And I was thinking, you're coming in for 12 hours to sit at my bedside and make sure everything's all right. And you can never kind of repay these people, can you?
And let's just say, they're so they laugh at you. They go, well, this is what... In fact, one of them came up with the phrase which she used when I did an article on it and in the book, because I knew she'd done an extra 2 hours, because I knew she should have gone 2 hours ago, but she was looking at... And I said, look, thanks for that. Why? What? She said, don't thank me. It's what we do. And it's that phrase, it's what we do, That gets you exploited, actually. It's what we do. Because people go, oh, well, they love it, don't they? Yeah. It's a vocation,
You don't need to give them a pay rise. They fucking love it.
It's what they do. That's partly true, isn't it? Yeah. If you do 80-hour weeks, you always do 45. They go, that's what they do.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Happy.
I know. If I went to if I did an 80-hour week versus 45, my boss went, "That's what you do, Tom. Don't worry about it. Fuck off. I want more money."
And these are well. You did an exam. Put £2,000 expenses claim. Yeah. That's what we do.
But it's true though, isn't it? After those first 8 weeks, maybe 8-10 weeks, when everyone was outside with pans and clapping and stuff like that. And then, like you said, mate, it is just a blip, isn't it? It just gets forgotten quite quickly, doesn't it?
And that was the thing that made me, because that's the intro of it. It's like kind of, we thought the notion of heroism had changed, but it hasn't. And it probably, maybe ages up a bit more, but really and truly, the same, I say, when it comes down to the honours list, the same cronies are getting them. Throw the odd celebrity one in, like Craig David, so he made a headline.
No way did he get one.
He did. Sally Webster from Corrie.
Shut up.
Yeah. But meanwhile, they gave I think there's 1,263, not that I learned the figure, MBEs, in the New Year's honours list. After last year, so after that year we had where basically we were all kept alive, or kept from death's door by nurses and doctors. And there was something like 120 odd from the NHS, from the caring service, and the usual MPs and lords and kickbacks and photographers, and Craig David got one.
Who decides? Is there a panel, or does someone? There's
an honours committee.
There's an honours committee who decides, right? These are what.
Put them out. Yeah.
Do you think, mate? This, I know you said it's about heroes, but class comes into there to an extent. Do you think this kind of upper class, when you see these kind of little uprisings, or do you think there is actually a kind of body of people who are a bit like, the fucking peasants are getting a bit too big for the boots here, aren't they? Do you reckon that is kind of that feeling goes on at in the back corridors, do you think?
In the sense that they
well, you can see the likes of Marcus Rashford and they're like, these...
give them their head, let them do it, let's see if it fizzle out, you know what I mean?
Do you think there's that feeling?
I think it's also, because I talked about the beginning of the book. I talk about when I mentioned the Peterloo massacre. I'm sure most people from most towns or cities can find an example of that in their own history if they bothered looking. And I cited the 1911 transport strike in Liverpool, where Churchill sent a gunboat up the Mersey, and they'd had enough, and they were out there. Liverpool was at the epicentre of it, and. So there was a bit of they started a riot, they caused a riot, they read the Riot Act. When you read the Riot Act, the cavalry goes in, waiting, blah, blah. And a few prisoners were taken to Walton the next day from town, and the cavalry kind of led them. And two innocent fellas, one was, I think, was putting up shutters, the other one was just moving to a house down Scotland Road, got shot and killed. And those two men, there's a little plaque outside a pub there, just was put up about 10 years ago. But my dad grew up 10 minutes away from there, and he would never hear of them, And at the time, it was it was the biggest funeral in Liverpool, and Catholics and Protestants, and they were at the time they were pretty ruthless against each other, but attended this massive funeral, and they just forgotten. They're just anecdotes, But yeah, they kind of helped them say, we better give them a few bob, we'll bring that transport strike to an end. But that does tend to happen. There's another theme in the book that working class people don't tend to find out their history of their own family too much. Because it's a personal story is that my nana, my Irish nana, she used to say to us, she saw the Easter Rising in Dublin in 1916, and I said, that's like saying, I was in Dallas and I saw JFK get shot in the head. I was sitting on the grassy knoll having a sandwich. You just wrote it off. Yeah. And she used to talk about it. She wasn't too keen. She was she was a bit of a Republican. She wasn't too keen on. She hated Churchill, stuff like that. But then a couple of years ago, when Brexit came, I thought, I'm going to get an Irish passport because she was born in Ireland, so I'll get my Irish passport, stay in a EU citizen. I'll laugh at everyone.
I couldn't do that. Loads of people I knew done that.
I can't wait till next time I can go. Everyone, the family and mates, are stood in the queue, and I'm drinking San Miguel through the back. But I had to get a load of documents in Ireland. I had to go back and pay an agency to find. Because you can't just say, yeah, me and Anna's Irish. You have to trace it back, to the birth records, all that. And so, just a long story short, it turns out she was born 1896 in Kildare. Then they moved to Dublin. And around the time of the 1916 Easter Rising, which is a pivotal point in Irish history, she's 19 and she's a waitress in Dublin. Dublin's not a big city. The Easter Rising lasted for 6 days. So she did. She will have seen it through the, but she had 26 grandchildren. So what time she got to sit down and discuss the Easter Rising with you? You don't do it. So but that's what I'm saying. If you go further up the class system, they all know who they are. They've all got titles to tell them who they are. They've got maps of their lineage on the wall. Most people talk about it more. I think the further you get down, because it's so. How often do you see that program? Who do you think you are?
Yeah.
And his work class, and he goes, I didn't know my granddad did that in the First World War. I didn't know my granddad was a gun runner for the IRA. They don't because they never discussed it that much, And it's kind of.
It's so interesting, isn't it? Yeah.
Do you think then there will be a time in maybe, I don't know, 50 years, 100 years, 300 years from now that the Queen, King, there won't be a monarch in this country, and it'll all be gone?
I think there'll always be a monarch, sadly.
You're right to go in on the monarch, because that's what kind of is at the top of it that keeps the system going. As long as they look cuddly to some people and kind and they do no harm, then the whole system kind
just
of gets propped up.
Keeps going. Yeah.
But I actually think. She is phenomenal, isn't she? In terms of, you've got to say that even if you're a staunch public like me, she's been there nearly. How long has she been through? 70 years on the throne next year, isn't she? So you'd have to be over 75 to not remember her every day of your life, kind of thing. So she's holding that together, I think.
Yeah.
She very rarely puts her foot wrong. She kind of.
If ever, yeah.
Apart from defending a fucking Nancy son, apart from
that. After that, then you're into it. Then you're into dodgy territory, aren't you? So with a bit of luck, yeah.
Nah, I can respect in the sense that I just hate the fact that there's just by being purely born into this family you are boom. That's the thing I hate about it.
Can I ask you a question, Andy? Because you kind of had to fight. You were told you're fighting for your Queen and country.
I had to say the oath and all that, yeah.
So did that feel strange for you if you didn't really? I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of lads felt the same. You were fighting for your country and you were fighting for yourself. You were fighting to survive and you were. But did that feel different? The whole Queen thing, I bet there's a lot amongst you who did feel proudly monarchist. I
always feel really weird. I think being a Scouser in the military is quite difficult. Yeah. I think, again, not me personally, but it's kind of, I think military seems to be like quite Tory in a sense. Yeah. It seems to be quite backed by them, and I think Liverpool being, of its own. But no, me personally,
so many Swaddies of Liverpool.
Oh, mate, the Northwest is the epicentre. It's the most from Liverpool and Manchester.
Really?
Yeah, which is crazy when you think of it. But I always remember, just before I answer your question, I remember being out on a ski trip in Colorado with a load of military lads when I think it was when the elections were going on, and they all hated Corbyn. I mean, I'm not as big as fan, but obviously I wanted Labour to come in. But fuck me, they hated them, and it was that whole.
That we had the IRA.
Yeah, the military thing. So the military hated Corbyn and all that kind of stuff, and it's such a weird. And I'm obviously fucking Labour, and it was this big weird thing. So I think it is weird being a Scouser in the military. But with regards to the Queen and country, I'll be honest, I never once thought of the Queen when I was in Afghanistan. I mean, you've again a lot of Scousers, Geordies, Jocks and Manx, and you're out in Afghanistan and you're looking after him and you're looking after him, and I'm not thinking of bloody Cameron or fucking Theresa May or fucking Tony Blair or the Queen. I'm looking after my mates and they're doing the same for me. So it never got political for me, and I never joined to fight for Queen and country. I joined the Marines because it was a great challenge and it looked fucking cool as fuck, if I'm being honest. I got to travel the world, I got to meet loads of great friends, got to, drink beer and have a good time all over the world, all that kind of good stuff. For me, mate, it was never political, it was never
Queen wasn't forefront in your...
The Queen or Bojo did not enter my mind, mate. No, not once.
I think... do you remember in like 2010 when there was the riots that spread from London and then Manchester and then there was... I can't remember who was in the car. There was a car that was attacked that had rules in. Stupidly, they went down...
It was Philip,
Prince Philip, was it?
Oh, I remember. You do it.
They just threw paint.
Charles and Camilla, I think.
Yeah, that was
Charles
it. Yeah,
en route to the theatre.
That was it. Yeah.
We weren't really threatened, were they?
No, not really. No, I mean, like in the scale of things, no. But like, you know, when like during that recession, 2008, 2009, and then back into 2010, you could have thought there might be an opportunity there for something to more pressure, whether it's from the public or whoever, about all this money that's going to, you know, the Queen and blah, blah, blah. And then William and Kate came along and then they got married and then there was big hoo-ha. The whole country seemed to come together, didn't they? And there was those weirdos who were outside Buckingham Palace with the flags for 4 days camping. And
I think the working class get bought off so easily by that shite, if you like. You know what I mean? And it's there, it exists, you can't deny it. And being from Liverpool, it is a bit different because, you know, most of them go, oh, come on, but they're all something money on. They bring lots of money for tourism, which they don't anyway. But they're not outside of Liverpool. There are areas, obviously, you know, but they kind of think, say all those seats that went Tory the last election, quite proud of their monarchy, I think, quite proud of the fact that Britain's different. And this is another thing I think about British history. I think a lot of and it might be to do with the fact that, you know, they have been successful in wars and they did have an empire. But I think most countries are forced to examine their own history. Say Germany, obviously, but Ireland, you know, forced to examine it because they were defeated or they were subjugated or whatever. I don't think the British do. I think from on top, they think history is this glorious tapestry of Britishness with no faults, which can't be questioned. If you question it, you're a commie, right? And you're unpatriotic. But really, it's there. It breathes this air of exceptionalism, that to be British makes you exceptional. Now, there may be traits, I mean, there may be some certain exceptional British people, but I don't think any race is exceptional in itself, you know what I mean? Or any country is exceptional in itself. But that's what we're bred to believe. That's the kind of thing I think that Farage played on, and a lot of people did with Brexit, is that the British should not be part of the European Union because we're exceptional. Look at our history, look at the war, even though the war was 80 years ago, and without America and Russia, we'd have been shagged. I mean, it's just, you know, it's kind of, and Churchill's an example. You know, I think Churchill was an exceptional wartime leader, no doubt about it. He was the man that Hitler didn't want to face because he was slightly mad, but I think he was also had outrageous courage, etc. But if you question Churchill, because he was dodgy on many other areas, you know, he sent gunships up the Mersey, he sent the Black and Tans over to Ireland in the early 20s to do what they wanted to do.
A lot of racism with India as well, wasn't
there? A lot of race with India, he fired on the miners and Tony. He didn't particularly like the working class. He just wanted, he was empire. He wanted, to him, his mission was to keep the empire intact. And that's why the war was so important. He could not surrender, because if they did, there'd be no British Empire. But it was that madness, if you like, that kind of drove him single-mindedly, well, until the Russians and Americans came in. But if you dare question him, to some extent, and John McDonnell tried it in the comment, John McDonnell, the former Labour deputy leader, said it, and he was absolutely slaughtered as a traitor for saying, because you asked a question by students, Churchill, hero or villain, and he went, villain Tony Pandy, but hero in the war, which is a perfectly balanced answer. Slaughter. Corbyn's sidekick says Churchill was a villain. You know, that kind of shite that you have to put up with. You don't examine history properly. It's either black or white, and Britain ruled the waves, Britain had an empire, Britain won that war, and therefore everything is justified. I think it's a shame. I think it's a real shame.
I think it's hilarious how we still call ourselves Great Britain. I want to know whose idea was it to say we're great at the start of it.
It's good, yeah.
You know, one day and he's went, we're not Britain anymore, fucking Great Britain. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Did people was it like the majority of people liked Hitler then, back then? Like, as in, like, was he well supported?
Hitler?
Sorry, like Hitler, fucking hell. There's a clip for you. Like Churchill. Like, was it... Well, you know, like when in now, like with, you know, you could the prime ministers before, you know, and Boris and everything. There's always this, you know, you see it on the media. But back then, was everyone supporting Churchill and was everyone behind it? Or was there a subset? Was that a small subset or?
Your answer was given to you in the 1945 general election results, when Churchill stood thinking, "I'm the hero of this great war. I've saved the free world. The Brits are going to love me." and Labour battered them into the biggest landslide at the time.
Right. I didn't know that. Yeah,
That's mad, isn't it?
There's footage of him at like the rallies in London, Charlton Athletic Ground, getting booed by the working class and throwing all sorts of shit thrown at him.
right.
Yeah,
Wow.
all those fellas who came out the army, demobbed, voted Labour because they realised we're not having that shit again. You know? And it's always
That's mad. That I didn't know that. Yeah.
just look at the 1945 election result. Clement Attlee won by a landslide, and Clement Attlee was this kind of really kind of demure, kind of boring figure. As Churchill said of him, he's a modest man with much to be modest about. But he battered him, you know.
What a great fucking insult that is.
Oh, he was good at insults. I give him that. He was great at insults, yeah.
Because I've watched the film Churchill. It gives all this portraying of like what he was like, and and the speeches. I've seen the speeches, and you think surely this like G's you up a bit, and then clearly
He was
not.
undoubtedly a brilliant. You would really struggle. Now how far on your left you are to say that he wasn't a brilliant wartime leader, because he was. Because I think he was at this I need to save the empire, and he could give speeches which rallied the people, and he did get America in there. But Pearl Harbor got America in there, I suppose. But,
Twisted the arm a bit anyway.
yeah, but it was a lot of propaganda's been done on behalf of that. The Britain saved the free world alone kind of thing.
Yeah.
But he wouldn't say no. But there's your answer about whether the working class loved Churchill. Not well, as I say, many didn't.
One thing then, talking about that kind of stuff and the people who were, Winston Churchill had these racism views in time. I've read from the bit about the book, what I've seen about Black Lives Matter is mentioned in the book. Is that right?
It's mentioned in the sense that I talk about Doreen Lawrence, because Doreen Lawrence's story is amazing. There's this immigrant from Jamaica, who grew up in London in the 60s and didn't come up against much racism, actually. Didn't really come up against much racism. And then she had this lovely son, Steve, and he was trained to be an architect, blah, blah. And he's killed by these thugs, these 5 white thugs, made at a bus stop. And similar to what, in the Hillsborough, she won't let it go. From the word go, the police were bent. They just went, they were interviewing them as kind of suspects almost, The way the Hillsborough families were seen as kind of, no smoke without fire, but he drinking, blah, blah, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And they closed ranks, and there was a lot of perverted the course of justice went on. But she kept going. And I was sitting in the Old Bailey opposite her, about 3 seats away from when the verdict came in on 2 of the killers, Norris and Dobson. And it was one of those moments, like, Jesus Christ. It was January about 8 years ago, I think. And just to see her get that justice was phenomenal. And then she badgered them. She overturned the laws in this country about racism, about what can happen. I mean, it doesn't say it's perfect now, but my point about that was she made sure that Black Lives mattered years before we heard about it. Yeah. Because she insisted her son's life, Stephen, mattered, and she fought. And against all the odds, as I say, it's quite phenomenal. Really.
Well, it's one of those stories. I didn't know her name in particular, but his story was one of those stories I've kind of just grew up with and kind of knew of.
Yeah.
But did they get done for murder then? They got the full sort of wrath of the law, those 2 chaps when you were in there?
2 of them did, yeah.
2 of them did, yeah.
2 of them. But they were sentenced, because they were juveniles at the time of the crime in 1986, so they were sentenced on that level, because you can't sentence someone. So if you're under 18, or you're 18 when you commit a crime,
of course, yeah.
Even if you get your 20 days, they don't sentence you as a 38-year-old, sentence you as an 18-year-old. So they got put away, yeah. But there's still 3 out there who didn't.
And those 2 other people haven't obviously said who are those other 3 people?
Well, they know they are. They know. I mean, the Daily Mail actually, of all the papers, put these are the killers. These killed Stephen Lawrence, 5 faces. If you didn't sue us, this was years ago, and they didn't sue them. You know what I mean? So, yeah, but it's proven it.
Right, on the point of the book, and I know you've mentioned a lot of people it's got me thinking about how actually you did mention it before, we don't look at our own history.
Yeah.
We should all just delve a little bit more. I mean, history was one of my favourite subjects, and when it's lit a fire in my belly now to think, God, we do need to look a bit more where we've been to know where we're going, don't we? And learn about these people.
I think that's it, yeah. I mean, as I say, my granddad was his family were Italians. He was literally 1 year old when he came to this country. Oh no, he was born in London, but they'd been here a year, and he came to Liverpool, my nana came from Ireland, he met in Park Road 3 doors down. I didn't know this till I looked at these documents. I didn't know where they'd got married, where they met, but I saw their addresses, 3A and 5A Park Road. You know. And what stories if you sat down and spoke to them? So I think a lesson is you should definitely tell your kids about yourself and your grandchildren, you know, if that's the case. But I think it's more that it feeds into what I'm saying about the fact that it's almost taken for granted that if you, again, it's how you get up the class system, I think, that their history matters, that they are...
More so than... Yeah.
But they talk about it, they've got names, you can probably look them up in Who's Who, they can go back 3 or 5 generations, you know. And as I say, things that get passed down, I mean, I suppose many working class, but we actually have a joke in our family that the only thing that ever got passed down after death was the cancer telly. It was that white telly in the white telly. This is the 80s. Someone did put a white telly in the room so the person who's dying had this shitty telly to watch with it. And when they went, it was like, well, who's having the telly? Well, you got the engagement ring, I'm having the telly. So it was like kind of, people didn't have anything to pass down. They didn't have anything materialistic to pass down.
Any titles or land or nothing to go.
They rented accommodation cast. But they had so much gold to pass down and what happened to them and what had made you, you know. And as I when I found out about me nan, and I wouldn't have done that if I hadn't been applying for a passport. Just the basics of it taught me what and takes you back a bit. And actually, again, her father turns out he was a Protestant from Dublin, and her mother was a Catholic from Belfast. So she usually say to me, it's really complicated, the troubles, because, like, you know, don't believe what you think that everyone in the South is Catholic and everyone knows. It's not, but I never pursued it, you know, it's not one of those things. Yeah.
Did you go through, like, did you go through, like, Ancestry or one, like, those websites, you know, where you can, like, delve in, or did you...
To get the passport?
To, like, find out all this information?
No, it's only when I needed documents from Ireland to get the passport. I went through an agency in Dublin who they look back at birth records and christening records.
And they find all this information for you.
And then I had to get, like, my mum's, from when my mum was married and blah blah blah, just so they can get a link.
Right, I'm with you.
And that's just go back to
all together. Then, yeah. I always remember a story, just off subject a sec, about in history, and when the Germans were fighting the Brits, and there was this particular battle, I can't remember the name of it, but you know, thousands of men are being lost on either side, and the Germans are pushing and pushing and pushing, and the Brits are somehow just firing back still, and the Germans are thinking, there can't be many more of them left now. We nearly took over this little town or wherever it was. And the Germans took some massive losses, so did the Brits, but neither didn't know how long the attack was going to go on for, or how many more soldiers there were. In the end, the Germans stopped, retreated, and that was it. If they'd known that there was literally just a handful of, you know, chefs and a couple of cooks, you know, like a couple of signallers, and there was, you know, less than 100 blokes left fighting for their lives, you know, they had thousands more in reserve that they could have easily run them. But they were like, no, we've took too many losses, we pulled back. And there's like these couple of hundred, you know, chefs that who would just think the whole course of history might be. And it's those little stories of heroism. And they've obviously then, you know, some of them will have survived the war, came back, and have got stories. And it's like what you've just said. I wonder if those stories are being told.
Yeah.
You know. Yeah, it's mad, isn't it?
Friends, family, and across, Brian, quickly, completely off subject, but what's
predictions for the season?
What's it been like being a journalist during this time period then, since like March 2020, when you can't see people and it's like...
Yeah, it's been okay for me, because I've been working from home for about 20 odd years, but no journalists don't work in our offices. They're all working from home. It's astonishing. Really? Don't get newspapers out. It really is, because I mean, if you just said to me you can get a newspaper out, but knowing what production is needed and the kind of different sports desks and features, and I laughed. But they're doing it.
They managed to do it, yeah.
And the knock-on effect of that, I'm not just talking about the Echo, but the company I work for owns like not just the minute, the Echo, etc., etc. And they're going to carry on doing that now. Which I think is because companies need to, particularly newspapers where they're losing sales, they need to make profits. So you can see where they're going to go. Well, hang on. Do we need that big building in Canary Wharf?
Yeah.
Hack that. Do we need one in Manchester?
100%, yeah.
Get it. But then you think it's going to be a shame for city centres, isn't it? If that's a kind of
the route that everyone's going down.
Yeah, and it will be, because if and also I feel sorry for a lot of sort of kids who, I don't want to be in my 20s or 30s working from my back room bed sit, and churning this crap out. Not crap, really good stuff. Churning this clickbait out, which a lot of them have to do these days, through Journalism, you get out there, you meet people, you go to pub with people, you get
making connections with people.
Yeah, and I think it's changing. It's a shame. And again, I see why. I mean, look down here, the Baltic Quarter. I mean, I see a future in that, because I think people might hire little offices and go and show you people. So you need social contact.
Yeah, of course, 100%.
You know, you can't just, because at the end of the day, when you finish, I didn't even mean that as a footballer phrase. I mean, literally at the end of your working day, you want to go out, you want to put your laptop down, go out, and I think areas like this, you want to go for a cup of coffee. It doesn't take that
definitely
at the end of it. I think little areas outside the city centre will start to thrive because people get flats there and they want to go out and meet people, because, you know, you can't just sit there all day staring at a screen, can you?
I just like the thought that when you mention like Canary Wharf and those sort of places, like I've never been in, you know, a headquarters of a large newspaper, but seeing the sports desk and everyone, like all that hustle and bustle and the editors over there and like all that stuff.
All on Zoom.
All on Zoom, yeah.
I'm amazed that they do it, because there's so many, particularly with the production of a newspaper, what we call the layout of the pages, and people need to be over each other's shoulders going, that doesn't work, that works, move that, let me see that. But they've clearly done it, you know. I mean, there's that great phrase, necessity is the mother of invention. And every time there's a crisis like this we've just been through now, there'll be so much comes out of this which we haven't even got our head around yet. Mainly by younger people who will outthink us and go, you do it that way.
I look up, we've got them coming on in a couple of weeks, a guy called Callan Holly. They've a couple of PTs in Liverpool, and gone from hiring gyms, they've just set up this whole thing from a home studio where they're just doing workouts from the house, and they've just smashed it. Just a couple of PTs just doing Zoom, and everyone's doing it in the gardens and that, and they've just set up this massive online clinic from the house, and that's it.
And then that's it,
no gym membership, no none of this, just.
But you've got to an extent, haven't you? You know, you can't. I mean, I went to Lancashire for a few days this week, where my business is from, this town she's from, and half the place was shut. You know, it's like but people don't go out. I mean, in Liverpool, thankfully, we still go out. You know what I mean? But like, I was saying, well, why aren't you open? Why aren't you open 3 nights a week? Because people don't come out. I mean, a few years ago there was 6 pubs in the town. Now there's 1, and the restaurants go, well, we only open Thursday to Saturday. This is really sad. This, you know, I mean, but
economically and stuff I can understand, but from a social perspective, it's horrible.
But also, if you can go to Own Bargains, and I don't know what ale costs at Own Bargains, but you know, if you can get 6 cans for a £5, and that'll do you watching the telly. I mean, it's good to turn a lot of people off, and if you're saying, well, what are they charging down the pub?
Yeah, 100%.
No, but yeah, that's what people are sadly thinking. Whereas I'd rather bloody bite the bullet and go and meet a few people and. There's a bloody live singer on or whatever, and I hope that doesn't completely die out, because it'd be a real shame if it does.
But yeah, no, I was just dead interested, because I remember Fleet Street and all that stuff about journalism and how all that is. I mean, even to the case that, you know, when you said they need people looking over your shoulder, looking at the newspaper, like, do you have copywriters who write headlines just for you and all that? Editors, and then they decide. They're doing it all from home, yeah.
So it's all doable, because we don't print for years we haven't printed newspapers in the same building that you produce them.
You send it off to a printers and then.
So, you know, Watford, I think in our case, and somewhere up here. But so that's always been that way. They'll send. I mean, when I was on the Echo years ago, I was what they call at one point a Stone sub, and the Stone is the old thing that used to go where the papers get produced, but it's called the Stone, I don't know, printers terms, but. And they used to set it up with, with literally putting letters in, and then they would hammer it down. Like, that wasn't that long ago before computers came in. But I was there, even just checking the page where the compositors would paste these headlines and pictures up, and you'd have to look at the page before it got sent off to get photographed. You know, but that's ancient history at the time.
Mad, isn't it?
That was cutting edge.
I mean, you forget. I mean. What a logistical nightmare. If you walk into any newsagent, and it doesn't matter wherever you are in the country, there's a newspaper that has maybe gone to print, I don't know what time you might send it to print, and then it's there at 7 a.m. the following morning, whichever shop you walk into, and there's 7, maybe 8 different newspapers. Well, that is pretty impressive.
I remember, and speaking of obviously about you being a journalist, I probably told this story, but you saw him about that process. There was a guy in the Marines, and I think it was like before they went to Afghan, something like Hello or OK magazine done a big massive photo shoot, and one of the lads is there, just unzipped his trousers and just had his cock out. Camera was done, sent to print, everything like that. and it's gone to print, and they printed, you know, thousands of these things before they noticed, and they were like, look, and they were like, it's too late. Oh, they like got fucking bollocked.
Did he? Who bollocked him?
It's this boss. Obviously the magazine weren't happy with him. Why's one of your lads got his dick out on the front page of the UK magazine? But of course, all that, you think it was just too late to, you spent too much money on it and stuff, and yeah, it is logistical nightmare. Mate, I can't wait to read the book.
Good.
Genuinely can't wait. I love history and to know stories about, you know, heroism and people who the unsung heroes. It's a great idea, and I can't wait to read it. Once again, it's out Thursday, the 5th.
So from Thursday you can order pre-order it now, but you get it. Most of the online places do it. It'll be in the shops. So.
In fact, this will be out Monday, so it will have been out Thursday before. So when you're listening to this, you can buy it now.
Yeah.
We'll put the links and stuff in the bio. Before you go, mate, we've obviously had many a beer last few years after going the match. You're excited for the footy to be back?
You know what I'm really excited about? I still can't believe it's going to happen. It's just going the match. Not so much Liverpool playing. I'm a bit distant from it in a way. I mean, I think they're doing well in pre-season. I'm looking forward to it. But what I'm really looking forward to is the ritual of going to the game, meeting your mates like yourself, and just having a bevy and hugging someone when they score. And I still can't believe it's going to happen.
Yeah.
Because it seems
so alien.
I can't imagine that Anfield in 2 weeks' time or 3 weeks' time will have 54,000 people in again. I think it's going to come along and slap you in the head, you know.
And have they said full capacity, or have they? Or?
They haven't really specified, but the word from the club is You know.
I'm with you, mate. As much as I love Liverpool, and that I 100%. It probably took the pandemic for me to realise, yes, I want them to win the league and the European Cup each year. I just miss going and seeing my mates and having a beer. And I mean, listen, we've been really blessed these last few years to watch a great team, but you just miss that ritual, don't you? And the build up. Oh, where are we meeting? Okay, there. What time? Right. What are you up? Where are you? Come on, you get the ale and I got it. All that.
It's a social event. It's made us realise that first and foremost, it's not this glorified super Sunday. Everything looks great and someone's worth 100 million, and you know, it's a social event. Whether you're watching a non-league team or you're watching a team at the top of the league, it's a social event that you love, and you love the game. That 90 minutes are a massive part of it. But it's the communal thing, and that's what it took off as a working class game in the middle of the middle of the 19th century in this country, and that's what it'll always be. And I couldn't even watch all those games last year. I could watch Liverpool, but when empty stadiums, fake noises,
no,
yeah. It was just. I mean, I'm glad they got through it, but it wasn't football, was it?
No, I can't wait for it to be back.
Mate, thank you so much.
Good, I enjoyed that.
You're in the esteemed club of second time on the podcast.
How many have you had?
100 and something people. Oh, within the second club, as in you've done a part two.
I think there's 3 people who've had a hat-trick.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Twice is...
Couple of... We've had...
See it again in 18 months.
Yeah. You know what I was going to do the intro for, and not so much you, but I thought it embarrassed Phil more. I was going to say it's great to have Liverpool's second most successful one.
Yeah, exactly.
Phil. No, Brian, absolute pleasure as always, mate. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, mate. Cheers, Paul.